On this vote, the yeas are 49, the nays are 51. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
That was Vice President Kamala Harris after Senate Republicans, along with West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin, blocked legislation to codify Roe v. Wade. Here's Harris after the vote.
This vote clearly suggests that the Senate is not where the majority of Americans are on this issue. It also makes clear that a priority for all who care about this issue, a priority should be to elect pro-choice leaders at the local, the state, and the federal level. Because what we are seeing around this country are extremist Republican leaders who are seeking to criminalize and punish women for making decisions about their own body.
Here with us to discuss is public defender and commentator Olayemi Olurin and Newsweek contributor Denise Long. Welcome to you both.
Morning. Good morning.
Good morning. So Olayemi, I wonder if Kamala Harris means she has to replace people in her own party with more pro-choice legislators, because they didn't even have Joe Manchin's vote. They didn't even have, obviously they were not going to get to 60 votes, but they couldn't get even every single member of their own coalition to support this.
Exactly, which I think is a great issue people are having with Democrats now. I'm not going to be unreasonable and say that she's not wrong. In order for them to get the vote and have the numbers that we need, more pro-choice senators and politicians. But the reality is people are very frustrated with Democrats constantly responding, vote blue, vote Democrat as the response to anytime something oppressive happens. But then these same things keep happening. And unfortunately, it's not like this was their first opportunity that they could have tried to codify Roe. Roe has been in existence for 50 years. They've had ample opportunities. So I think people are a little dissuaded and disenchanted with the Democrats right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially since, Democrats are right now campaigning, Jim Clyburn for one, are campaigning down in Texas to elect a anti-choice Democrat there who is running against a pro-choice progressive that they could be supporting. Barbara Lee was asked about this recently on Mehdi Hassan's show. Why should Democratic voters believe and trust in you that we need to just elect more pro-choice Democrats when even the Democratic Party establishment is out here campaigning right now against a pro-choice Democrat? Denise, what do you make of all of this from a conservative perspective? Is this a fight that Democrats should take on right now, or should they do what they've been doing for years, which is try to downplay this issue and court more moderate, they call more moderate voters, I would call them more conservative voters?
Well, part of the question that I have, Brianna, is the extent to which what they put forth on the floor actually reflects the vast majority of American sentiments regarding abortion, which is the idea that there should be some allowance for exceptions regarding rape and incest. But we also know that that is a very, very small percent. I think it doesn't even amount to 2% of abortions that are sought. So that is part of the question. I think there is something to be said about the extent to which local state governments are going to the other extreme, where they are outlawing all abortions in all circumstances. And I think that's been the fear. That's what people have been pushing back from the against the conservative perspective. And I think also what we haven't seen a lot of is people really talking about what this majority opinion actually speaks to, and if our reaction in public, if people's reaction in public is actually talking about something that isn't proposed to happen in the majority ruling in the first place. Yes, we do know conservatives want to outlaw abortions because the idea is that it is an innocent life regardless of how that life came to be.
Well, we definitely wanted to get to this. The ACLU tweeted last night, abortion bans disproportionately harm Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, the LGBTQ community, immigrants, young people, those working to make ends meet, people with disabilities. Protecting abortion access is an urgent matter. Racial and economic justice, as I noted in response to their tweet, seem to be missing a key group. No? Women, maybe? Can they say the word? Are they capable? Are we just not willing to define it anymore? What do you think, Olayemi?
Listen, obviously, this is an issue that disproportionately impacts women. To shoot the ACLU some bail here, I think what they're probably trying to reference in this list is that the women that will be most impacted are poor people, are poor women, poor Black and brown women, immigrants, people with less access, as opposed to, I think sometimes they can dismiss
LGBT women. I mean, not to
I do think
offend anyone, but
get canceled on your own, Robbie.
Yeah. Look, Glenn Greenwald made this point, saying that straight people are probably going to be implicated by abortion rights more than gay people by the nature of how reproduction works. But I think there is another point to be made, whether or not they're disproportionately affected or not, is that some percentage of people who are seeking abortions are the victims of rape, and certainly people aren't checking people's sexual orientation before they decide to rape a person. So
they're not disproportionately affected.
I think
perhaps affected as well.
Yeah, I think a really important critique, and I think a lot of liberals need to take heed to this, is that they over rely on this idea of disproportionality and disparate impact to make points that don't necessarily need that, for the underlying point to be a sound and ethical one. And Denise, I want to come to you were saying something earlier that was related to this. You were asking about you were talking about how this is playing among voters in their home versus in public, and the emphasis that some liberals, some people who are defending abortion rights across the political spectrum, put on the kind of less common reasons for abortion, rape, incest, etc. And I take your point that why is there so much emphasis on that when it's such a small sliver of motivates such a small sliver of abortions? But there's an opposite point too. If that is there is such a consensus about abortions for those reasons, why is it that certain conservatives keep pushing for to get rid of abortion rights for those areas? The case that this is all predicated on, the Dobbs case out of Mississippi, it did not ask to get rid of the Roe v. Wade. It only asked for a 15-week abortion ban, and it did obviously not protect rape and incest exceptions. But why do conservatives keep setting themselves up to have to defend such an unpopular policy if, in fact, it's such a small number of abortions? Shouldn't they just say, okay, we'll let those ones slide?
I think it gets down to the core question around when life begins. And I think the conservative perspective is life begins at conception. And under what circumstance does a government morally give largesse, opportunity, and again, funding to the ending of that life, regardless of how that life came to be, whether it came from consensual sex with the intent to give birth, or whether it came from a failure of, condoms, birth control, all of those types of things, or if it came from forced sex. And so the question there becomes, if you are a hardliner on life beginning at conception and that we have no moral right to support the ending of that life, then yes, you would say that there are no exceptions to abortion, because you would essentially be saying that you are supporting the murder of a life.
And
now, to your point about...
I want to come back, though, to this tweet, not because this tweet is like the most important thing ever, but I think it is so reflective of exactly why, if Democrats are asking themselves, why are we losing? Why are we about to get wiped out at every level? Why are Republicans about to destroy us in the upcoming midterms, possibly then again in the presidential election? What are we doing wrong? And if they are honest with themselves, they will look at things like this and say our inability to acknowledge that women exist, to say as an organization that defends the rights of various people, to say this is an issue that affects women. They can't say that because unhinged, crazy activists in their coalition, who are not important and don't represent enough voices, don't want them to say that. And they should just ignore those people and offend them because it doesn't matter. But they're so afraid of offending them that the Democrats are going to lose at every level for the foreseeable future. And I think it's a huge issue.
If
I was going back to that because that point is incredibly important, Robbie. As a diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, both scholar and consultant and trainer, this is what I have seen all the time in doing this work is that people on the left are very loud and very wrong often when they're talking about this disproportionality. A lot of the pushback that you are seeing around the anti-racism work that came out of the murder of George Floyd is being uprooted now because of these extreme levels of rhetoric calling abortion, moderation, ban, or whatever white supremacy is fascinating to me, especially considering the history of eugenics and all of that in regard to controlling the Negro population in America. So you are absolutely right. Part of the reason they are losing people, bleeding supporters, is because of this extreme, nonsensical view of things and their misuse of legitimate social justice issues.
Yeah. Olayemi, we want to give you opportunity to respond.
I absolutely disagree with most of what's just been said. If there's anybody that panders to the craziest part of their base more and nonsensical information, it's the Republicans. If we're going to have an argument, I think it's that the Republicans do it better. If anything, I think what Democrats' problem is they never pander to who are the leftists or who are being diagnosed as the crazies, right? Joe Biden is a person that was elected because, he was the lesser of two evils. There are a significant amount of people that don't necessarily support that choice or think he was the best and most progressive, but they voted for him because he was less worse than Trump, and they thought maybe we could move him left, and that's not what's been shown. I think what's actually happened when you see decisions like Roe, it's not just hysteria. The draft opinion that we saw does seem poised to roll back rights that will affect these different minority groups that you see the ACLU talk about. It is set to roll back those rights too, and so that's what you're seeing as the issue. But the responses, even from the Democrats, are not supportive, even in rhetoric. It's one thing that you can't codify Roe or you can't do anything substantive right now to protect the rights of the American people or who are your voters base. But even when you come out, you criticize the people on your own party and how they're going about protests and the decision. So I think what's happening actually is Dems do not do enough or say enough to support their own voter base, and I think that is what's happening. Not that they're pandering too much to the left; they're not pandering enough to the left.
Yeah, Manchin's the one that's holding up the agenda, not some crazy loon AOC or whatever.
Thank you.
Denise and Olayemi, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. And coming up next, well, Bitcoin had an interesting week. Is crypto dead? Liz Wolfe, associate editor at Reason, will join us to give us all the latest.